Two men who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. Be in 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The amazing spider talk, the amazing spider talk. Come swing through the air, sit back and prepare for the amazing spider
Hello, I'm Dapper Dan Gavosden, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which definitely count.
Well, those are some hot takes, Dan. Well, I'm the mischievous Mark Ginocchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals. But Dan, I'm holding the line. The annuals don't count.
You know, nothing changes as time continues to progress forward. Well, anyway, everybody, welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. And, you know, to that point, I want to say thanks to everybody for joining us for a special episode of the all-new Amazing Spider Talk. It's special because, Mark, you and I are introducing, finally, Season 5 of the show. It's taken a bit of a long time, and a lot of you are probably wondering, well, what happened to the so-called fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe? We've been dealing mostly in modern stuff over the past few months. And Mark, I think the main answer to that is just like COVID happened. And while we initially had like really positive thoughts about, you know, continuing normally, you know, there's no discounting how much this was kind of just like a way to like upend everybody's lives.
Honestly, life happens, you know, and you know, we have kids in school and you working in school and, you know, you moved and, you know, like it's just a lot of stuff was going on and, you know, work is always work for us. Unfortunately, this is not our day job. It'd be great if it was, but alas, I think we're finally in a place where we're going to be moving forward and we got some really cool ideas, I think, that are going to come to fruition in this season. And I'm personally really excited because this is, you know, some of my favorite comics of all time are going to be discussed during this season, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like this is really just a way of saying like in the next few weeks, and you'll hear more details from us, especially if you follow us on social media, you know, about the exact launch date of season 5. But I would say expect it in the next few weeks to kind of get kicking off. There's some things that Mark and I are waiting on that we don't want to say anything about yet, but we hope we can line up to make the season extra special. And that is also another reason that we're kind of holding back. So let's talk about what we're going to be covering this season. I know we've in the past said this is the season of Stern. That remains true. So Mark, what are some of the things people, if they really want to kind of like, you know, follow along with us, you know, obviously you don't need to read stuff to follow along with us. We're going to kind of recap it for you and tell you a bit of the history. But if you really want to kind of like use this as your guide for reading Spider-Man, what should people kind of do to keep up with us?
It's the season of Roger Stern, but it's also so much more. I mean, you know, in terms of like, I guess the foundation of the content of where we're going to be getting a lot of our episode content from. I mean, in terms of the main book, Amazing Spider-Man, you know, we're looking at issues 224 to 252. The bulk of that is written by Roger Stern or plotted by Roger Stern with a couple of exceptions in there. Also the Amazing Spider-Man annuals. Yeah, we'll count them for this, I guess. Issue 16 and 17. But then, you know, in terms of the B-books, we got Spectacular Spider-Man. The bulk of that run that we're going to be covering throughout the season is going to be in issues 62 to 100, as well as Spectacular Spider-Man Annual number 4. And those are actually mostly Bill Mantlo issues. So that's why when I say it's Roger Stern, but more. And obviously it's going to be the context of other stuff going on during the time. So, you know, like as Dan Dan said, I mean, this is not required reading. We're not giving you homework, but if you want to get, I guess, the full experience, go to Marvel Unlimited and then check out some of those issues, or check out a trade paperback. A lot of these books are collected in some fun collections. So.
And what better homework is there than reading Roger Stern and Bill Mantlow's Spider-Man from this era? I mean, this era is beloved for a reason. And I also think, and we'll get to this in our conversations, that if you're reading Amazing Spider-Man and Spectacular together, this is probably one of the greatest moments of synergy between those titles. So it really is a fun read between, reading these two concurrent books.
Do we want to kind of give a preview of what some of these episode topics are going to be, Dan?
Yeah, sure. So I think, it only makes sense to start off with like the man himself, this season. We're going to start off with an episode about the Roger Stern run, specifically both, our thoughts as well as the kind of historical significance and characteristics that define the Roger Stern run. And that's going to be a great, celebratory way of kicking things off with a familiar topic, really, because we talked about Roger Stern's Spectacular run as the conclusion to our previous season. But, there's something really special about his Amazing Spider-Man, and I can't wait to talk to you about it, as it's one of my favorite eras on the book.
Absolutely. And if we're going to be talking about the one man from that book, I think we should talk about the other man from that book, and that's going to be John Romita Jr. That's right. I mean, JR did start some penciling duties on Spider-Man books prior to this run, but this is certainly where he cemented himself, I feel, as a Spider-Man artist. I mean, of course, he would have a second, probably even more celebrated run years later on the book, but certainly this is where JR got his name made, I would say. We got to talk about his art and his contributions and, all the cool stuff that he contributed during this era as well.
One of the episodes I'm most excited about, Mark, and this is one of the only guest appearances that I can confirm for everybody, is Ron Frenz will be joining us again on the show, one of our favorite guests coming back. And we haven't had him on for a little while, so I'm really excited to have him, but we thought we'd do something a little bit different. And what we're going to be doing with Ron is we're going to be reading Kid Who Collects with Ron. I dare say maybe the most famous issue from Roger Stern's run is The Kid Who Collects Spider-Man. Do you agree with me, Mark?
Yeah, I certainly in terms of a single issue story, I would say it, and it's one of those stories that transcends comics. And we talked about it from a content standpoint, but getting Ron's perspective in terms of the pencil side, I think it's going to be really fascinating. It's going to be, I can't wait to do that episode, frankly.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it because what we're going to be doing is, and especially if you follow us on YouTube, we're going to be going page by page through the artwork with Ron as he details his thought process and working off of Roger Stern's script to produce, I think some really iconic visuals, for that story. So I think that's going to be a real special treat. And like you said, I'm very excited. So what do we got up next?
We have in the past talked about the loves of Spider-Man's life, and this era is notable for probably one of the most unique loves of Spidey's history, and that's the Black Cat. And we're gonna, we talked about the introduction of the Black Cat a little bit during our Marv Wolfman episode, but this is really the time where Spidey and Black Cat got intimate, for lack of a better phrase, and we're gonna go through some of the fun stories that came out of that. I know, Dan, you love these stories with all your heart. You find nothing ridiculous or absurd about anything having to do with Spidey and Black Cat in the 80s, right?
No, not at all. We will happily return to my critique of the issue where Black Cat introduces Spider-Man to her mother. That'll be a fun kind of return. And, also we'll return to kind of conversations that Mark and I have had in the past about that era of Spectacular, because this won't just be kind of just a Black Cat episode. It's going to be kind of like a Spectacular Spider-Man Bill Mantlo recap episode, although most of that book in this time was very focused on Black Cat and her relationship to Spider-Man. In many ways, it was more of a relationship book than it was kind of like that single solo title. And I think it gave Spectacular a real focus for the first time. So that's going to be really fun. And part of that is the Owl Octopus War, which Mark and I have talked about before, a really great storyline. So we'll probably be revisiting, some of the conversations we've had about that storyline in the past.
in terms of another episode that kind of follows the format of this show. We've had one of these every season, except this one's going to have a unique spin based on, mainly based on how Roger Stern approached the book. It's going to be other people's bad guys, right? Certainly when you look at the Stern run, some of the more famous stories that he wrote didn't involve the likes of Doc Ock or Green Goblin or anyone like that. It was characters like the Juggernaut, Cobra, Mr. Hyde. I mean, who are these guys? We're going to get into it because that was, who the bulk of the run was consisted of in terms of Spidey's adversaries. And I think that's part of what makes this run so unique, frankly.
You mentioned the Juggernaut, and I think, everybody knows the story. Nothing can stop the Juggernaut. What's interesting about that storyline is that it went on to kind of inspire this this constantly retold storytelling motif of Spider-Man against the impossible odds, right? And so we're going to have an episode just about that. Yes, we love Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut, but, we've got so many other fights inspired by it. That would be like the fight with Firelord, or even just the reprisal of Something Can Stop the Juggernaut, but by Stern many years later. So we're going to do a whole episode about this motif and Spider-Man stories that were inspired by Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut.
Yeah, that one excites me. I believe Juggernaut was certainly one of my essentials way back when we did that episode. So where my heart is on this one. I think on the Brevoort episode, I even said it was my favorite issue, didn't I? So I guess you can hold me to that.
You did.
The next thing, this is actually going to be a 3-part episode, Dan, and coming from me and people who have followed this show for the last almost 8 years, this will ring true, I think. We're going to do the end-all, be-all analysis of the Hobgoblin. We already did our mystery format with annual earlier this year, Dan. I guess we can't do it quite like that, but certainly for all those who know my particular obsession with this, it's not just about the character himself, who's pretty awesome and who was introduced during the Stern run, but also I've always had a specific fascination with the behind-the-scene politics, so much so that I think we've had tons of con interviews, Dan, you and I, where I've dragged our interviewees into the mud tell us about the Hobgoblin. We got Christopher Priest on the Spider-Man podcast, probably the only Spider-Man podcast he's ever done. And what do I ask him about? What do we ask him about?
The Hobgoblin. What else would you talk to him about?
Exactly. That was literally we get to Terrificon in 20, was it 18? And we hey, Mr. Priest, can we interview about this? He's like, yeah, sure. We're like, what? It's happening. So anyway, we're going to be doing that in 3 parts. The first one is going to be kind of, the introduction in terms of, I guess the comic book content of the Hobgoblin from this run. And then the second part is going to be some of the behind the scenes material. So, that's actually going to extend beyond the original confines of what we're covering this season. But I think for context standpoint, we need to get into that. And then the third part is going to be after the Hobgoblin was resolved in the 80s, Roger Stern actually came back about 10 years later to fix it with his miniseries Hobgoblin Lives. And again, I know we're jumping ahead in time, but I think this is the way we have to explain the Hobgoblin, right, Dan? There's no other way to do it.
I don't want to wait 3 or 4 seasons to get to the conclusion of the Hobgoblin story. I think just for my own kind of greedy purposes, I am itching to get into the Hobgoblin with you, Mark, and I think so are our listeners. So I think this is going to be really fun. We might try some new things with format there where we incorporate elements of our old interviews and new interviews that we get about this. We want to make this the conclusive document on the Hobgoblin and kind of get it all on the table as much as we can, because we don't want to put people through pain or make them relive horrible nightmare experiences again. But I think for our purposes, we want to just kind of be able to put the Hobgoblin down, right? It has haunted us and our show and your writing for a decade now, Mark, it's time for us to kind of seal the lid, on the Hobgoblin's tomb and bury it, and in a fun way. So this will be our way of doing that.
I love it.
And then to cap all this off and lead us into what will eventually be season 6, we're going to talk about Secret Wars. Mark, are you going to break out your action figures for this one?
Yeah, I'd love to. Actually, some of my action figures, Dan, are still in my cubicle at work, where I've only been a handful of times since March. So maybe I need to go in and rescue them for that episode, so they can join in on the podcast with us.
So come see Mark play with his toys. No, Secret Wars. It's the introduction of the black suit, and we'll talk about all the behind the scenes that went into making that happen, and the first big major Marvel event, that then led into the next run with DeFalco and Friends. I think it's going to be a good way to end season 5, which I think, sounds already to me like to be like one of the more exciting seasons of the show.
Yeah, but Dan, there's one more treat that we're going to be having in this season, and that's at some point, and granted, we can't exactly pinpoint where, because I guess it depends on your counting, and we're still trying to figure that out. It's kind of like how Amazing Spider-Man went back to legacy numbering at some point, and then decided, no, we need to count Renew Your Vows, and we need to count. Anyway, there will be an episode 300 during this season. We all know that, from anyone who studied me going back to the Chasing Amazing days, that 300 is a very special number for me, and it's going to be a very special number for us. Our 200th episode was actually done on the floor of Terrificon back in the day. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, I don't think we'll be able to recreate that magic again, but we are going to try and make it as special as we can, given the context of the time we're in right now. And how can our listeners make it special too, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, we always have our phone line you can call into and leave us a message, but we've made it a habit for these centennial episodes to have listeners call in with their memories of the show, or really anything they want to kind of express about the show, for the 300th episode. Like, obviously, Mark and I are going to be looking back on the past 100 episodes and highlights for us, but we would love to hear from you guys. And the way you can do that is by calling us and leaving us a message, or you can email us at amazingspidertalk@gmail.com and leave us an MP3 or some other audio file that we can play on the show. But yeah, you can call us at 9 Red Goblin. Yes, we are the creators of the Red Goblin. Don't let it be forgotten. And that's because our phone number again is 9 Red Goblin. And if you call it, you can leave us a voicemail. If I can hear it and understand it, I will play it on the show at the end of episode 300. And we always like to do that to kind of celebrate everything that we're doing here. And yeah, if you call in, tell us your name, where you're calling from, or anything you feel comfortable sharing with us. That would be a lot of fun. And we love hearing from you guys. It's not often we get to hear from the listeners. So this would be a really special event. So episode 300, 9 Red Goblin is the way that you can participate.
Absolutely. All you goblins and non-goblins out there, we welcome your phone calls for sure. So Dan.
So that's it, Mark.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff coming down the pike.
Yeah, Dan. I mean, this is going to be, like I said in the beginning, a really exciting season for us. I think that these are like the comics that made me a fan, and they actually came a little bit before I started reading Amazing Spider-Man, but going back when I was younger and reading up on these comics, I mean, this is what sealed my fandom. So this is going to be a really special season to do. Secret Wars, I have the action figures. Juggernaut's my favorite issue. Hobgoblin has been the obsession of this show for the better part of a decade. I don't know what else you could want. I mean, this is where we're at, guys. So I hope everyone out there is excited as we are to key in, and I'm glad that we're finally closing in on getting this ball rolling, because this is going to be something special.
Awesome, Mark. I can't wait. Well, thank you all for joining us for this weird season 5 introduction episode, and we hope to see you kind of tuning in with us when that first episode launches in the next few weeks. So thanks again. And as always, this episode you're listening to right now was edited by Rick Coast with production support from Andy Myers. And our artwork, as always, comes handcrafted by artists Ron Friends, Sal Buscema, and Ray Sumser. And our theme songs were produced by Rylan Bojack, Tony Thaxton, and Spider Madge. And it can't be said, without the support of both our community and our patrons and our editors and all the people that work on these shows, we couldn't continue delivering this content for you. So just an extra special thank you to them as well. So Mark, until we finally get off our lazy butts and kick off season 5, what's our motto?
That motto, of course, is, with great podcasts, there must also come the amazing Spider Talk.
Don't miss the next